state of the Ambazonia resistance against Cameroon?
Not entirely. As I pen in the message that was just read, there are certain fundamental problems with the national liberation strategy, which we need to work on. But I'm confident that we are going to find a quick fix to those limitations, and we will be back on track from a very holistic perspective.
As you are aware, Cameroon has declared victory over the Ambazonian people. They have done so again in the state of when the colonial general Valerie Inca visited border areas. Also, the grim statistics from CDC in terms of Ambazonian loss of the economic sabotage strategy, which you've noted from 500 million in 2017 to a whopping $18 billion in profit. Is your strategy working?
Yes. I have frozen on the camera. Yes, the strategy is working. We are going to find some optical changes that might seem to be interpreted as affecting the strategy. And sometimes there will be shifts in emphasis. Many times want but victory is that in forces, their entrenched nature, how well armed they have become, the areas they control, and most importantly, their ability at this stage to work together. We lost some grounds, which I had explained before, and we need to work extremely very hard. And Amazonians need to refocus on the liberation plan, not on the excitement and the politics. I know we are very much interested in politics. Politics doesn't liberate. We must be focused on the hard work, what is required from each and every one of us as a patriot in the face of the existential threat that we face from Cameroon, to be able to regain in a strategic way, our liberation focus. But our plan is working. We are working extremely very hard on a daily basis to make sure that the limitations created deliberately by Ambazonians in their pivot towards politics and liberation is fixed.
What are the contributing factors that led to the rehabilitation and now the profit racking of Cameroon of CDC?
I don't want to. I have dealt with some of the contributing factors before. Standing is predicated on making profit, and once you make occupation less profitable and you increase the cost of the occupation, the occupier loses appetite in prosecuting the policy of occupation. And so our strategy at the onset was to target the profit-making institutions, economic institutions, and to undermine cripple the economy was to make sure that we demonstrate our ability to control the socioeconomic and political life within Amazonia. We have listened to a lot of report. Contributing factors has been, one of them has been tribalism, where forces that were fighting in this area who had settled, whose parents had settled in these areas, especially within the Fako-Meme axis, were taunted as settlers by supposed Ambazonian leaders. For them, it was a strategy to take control of these areas. And they undermine our control, undermine our ability in this area. We also know that one of the contributing factors in corruption. These big parastatals, they make a lot of money. And so when you institute a strategy that undermines productivity, they are bound to use corruption as a tool to maintain productivity. To reject such overtures of huge financial benefit requires a high sense of nationalism and patriotism above self. And I think some persons fall into that trap. And so they basically undermine our strategy in this area. It's minimal. It hasn't reversed, because one of the things we also wanted to achieve was to make sure that these institutions that Cameroon used to accumulate massive wealth do not also present themselves as collateral for projecting Cameroon's credit rating. And I think we have reduced productivity within CDC. Even though there has been an uptick, it has still not reached the minimum level of production prior to commencement of our resistance.
I think right now, you're also talking as a politician. We would like you to be as honest and frank with the Ambazonian people as possible. You're very cautious with your words. You don't like to point fingers, and therefore we solve problems when we don't even know where those problems are coming from.
No, I know one of the things I try to avoid is to bait Ambazonians. Ambazonians enjoy gossip. They enjoy what they call chaos because it gives everyone an opportunity to make an opinion. And I think 5 years into this war, we know the culprits. It doesn't require wordings from my mouth. What Ambazonians require from me is a solution. Ambazonians don't need me to responsible for this we've had. What Ambazonians want to hear from me, what am I doing to be able to find a solution to this? I cannot repeat myself time and again, finding excuses as a leader. That stops with me. And I'm going to provide solution to the reversal of our fortunes. The culprits are there.
Are you aware that that the Cameroonian colonial state has officially proclaimed and declared the Ambazonian people as people that belongs to Cameroon in 2020 and the early part of 2021? They did a constitutional amendment in which they defined, for the first time, citizenship was defined in Cameroon. And the constitutional amendment, I think the article there for citizenship defined that anyone who was born in what they call East Cameroon or what they call Southern Cameroons is considered an Ambazonian, or anyone whose parents originate from these two territories is considered an Ambazonian. Do you see this as that Cameroon has finally answered the question of marginalization of Ambazonians, and therefore its PR campaign, it's working? They also hosted Nations Cup, They have last week succeeded to allow PWD Bamenda. They've given the trophy to PWD Bamenda as part of their optics. Are you worried? Or you think all of these things do not matter at all?
You know, there were times I fought alone. There were times in my trajectory of struggle and resistance against Cameroon when we were just a few of us. You didn't have this mass mobilization. You didn't have these international acceptance of violation of international law. Cameroon is reputed for cosmetic changes to very serious issues. It has been its MO from time immemorial. Even within its own state, it's very good at using cosmetic approaches to attempting to lead the international community. And it is not a linear project. There are times when perception will be very deceptive. There are times when the enemy will present a case as though it has normalized. If Ambazonia is normalized as an entity under Cameroon, you will not need to provide the level of security that you provide for players of PWD. If Ambazonia was normalized, you will not have a DO and a mayor vaporize from their car, and you will not need all the propaganda that Cameroon constantly demonstrate. You cannot make Ambazonians through legislation citizens of Cameroon. As I have argued before, it is not like we have been citizens of Cameroon and are agitating within that context to create a new state. We are originally citizens of Ambazonia, and what we are facing is the annexation of our land by an external power. And the way Cameroon is over your institute borders, I am not worried. The fundamentals of our struggle are sound. Ambazonians in their majority believe in their independence. Ambazonians in their absence and our strategy to make our PR campaigns that do not address the underlying cause of the war that it declared in our country. So what I will tell my people is remain undermine ability to establish conditions for political legitimacy and continuously punish Cameroon economically to ensure that the occupation is costly. We will cripple them. It will take a while. And as I am moving forward to ensure that we work together and refocus on the strategy that works rather than political grandstanding, I am confident that in the shortest time possible, the effect of both the political and defense strategy reset is going to be felt both in the homeland and international.
there is a project on the desk of Mr. Bia for the creation of a deep sea port in Victoria to uplift, to create employment for the Ambazonian people, to boost economic activity within Ambazonia or within the southwest and northwest, to satisfy what most people termed the lack of development within the southwest and northwest. Should in case, with the way things are going, if Cameroon succeeds to build a seaport in Victoria, what do you think the implications will be in the perception of Cameroon coming to its senses in terms of balanced development, and therefore there will be no need for people to revolt and fight for a separate state or restoration of a separate state?
The assumption in that question is based on a very fluid and flawed premise on why people fight for freedom, for their country. And these are assumptions that I have dismissed, and I've told communicators and leaders to not market to the Amazonian people. The one assumption from the beginning is that when you fight for freedom, the occupier no longer exists within your land. That's a flawed assumption. The strategy which we put in place to undermine Cameroon is based on the fact that we never had a zone of incursion. In all liberation struggles, the enemy has had over 50% of the being contested. Called, as we call the vast areas in Eritrea of independence. Timor basically even control territory. East Timor control territory. Even in a non-liberation struggle like that of South Africa, victory wasn't because of the territorial control or armed resistance of the Umkhonto Wesizwe. It was based on a national liberation strategy that strengthened international rejection of the apartheid system, built South African consciousness of their right to live freely in their own country. Our struggle is predicated on nationalism, that the violation of international law can simply not be normalized through construction of a seaport. That systematic impunity to maintain occupation of a country can never be normalized by some cosmetic, political and economic project. There are Ambazonian nationalism and nationality can simply not be bought over by investing monies that you borrowed from international monetary institutions that will be paid by the next generation. With independence, there are territories that will remain firmly under the grip of Cameroon. But our strategy is designed to make sure that we undermine their ability, that we force them. The government within
unanimously passed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration was an instrument to maintain justice and order in in a world shattered with war and oppression. So we have come here today on the 10th of December in front of the embassy of La République du Cameroon, the most corrupt country in the world, the most oppressed country in the world. We have come to protest. Today, we are assembled again and we are standing far away from the oppressive embassy. The embassy has been surrounded by the German police. Do you want me to say the German police and the German state is playing a conspiracy role here or what? Why should Germany and why should the German police allow the embassy staff to use video cameras and audio cameras to film the protesters? Have they not learned from history? We will continue this struggle until freedom will reign for our people. We will never surrender because our cause is a just one. Wonderful. Wonderful.
That was accepted by the police. So we want to do that. One person or two? Three persons, yeah.
Ich habe mit einem Mitarbeiter der Botschaft gesprochen. Man erklärt sich bereit, diese Note dann am Zaun entgegenzunehmen. Ja? Wen möchten Sie denn da haben? Möchten Sie da jemanden Bestimmtes haben?
Der Ambassador.
Der wird das persönlich nicht entgegennehmen. Es wird ein Mitarbeiter der Botschaft an den Zaun herantreten und das dann von Ihnen entgegennehmen und dann zum Botschafter weiterbringen.
Yes, the one.
Ist dann abpassiert?
Ist der hier? Wir haben vereinbart, dass wir das hier am Zaun abgeben. Das haben wir gerade drüben abgesprochen und so in Ordnung, dass wir das dann machen.
Let's do it. Come out now.
Let's do it.
It's okay, no problem. We have these prisoners that your government is keeping in jail. I'm not talking loud because the camera is. Yes, I would like you to give it to your ambassador, the representative of the PR regime, okay? Okay.
So what was the main purpose of this demonstration? To calm down the government?
And no,
One time! Today, 54 years ago, the United Nations General Assembly unanimously passed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration was an instrument to maintain justice and order in a world shattered with war and oppression. So we have come here today on the 10th of December in front of the embassy of La République du Cameroon, the most corrupt country in the world, the most oppressed country in the world. We have come to protest. Today, we are assembled again and we are standing far away from the oppressive embassy. The embassy has been surrounded by the German police. Do you want me to say the German police and the German state is playing a conspiracy role here or what? Why should Germany and why should the German police allow the embassy staff to use video cameras and audio cameras to film the protesters?
All right. Oh yeah, it looks a bit brighter now.
Welcome back, fellow Ambazonians. We're back on the interview with the leader of WOF. Let's move on with let's move on with our conversation. Back on Cameroon, they are attempting to create the post of a vice president And according to intelligence, a top Ambazonian liberation leader, in order for Cameroon to show good faith, Cameroon wants to nominate and appoint an Ambazonian liberation leader into this post. Should that happen, how would this affect your liberation strategy? And how would this affect the Ambazonian liberation if that is accepted by that person?
You seem to be also talking now like a politician. What's the name of that person? Be straightforward, man. Be straightforward. Give me a name. You're still thinking.
Yes.
All right, that's fine. Let me take your question. Don't give a name, because sometimes that's why I always try to make sure that we don't allow ourselves, to lose the substance by putting people's names everywhere. Now, let me tell you something. These traitors on the other side, these Cameroon people, they have not learned from history. Foncha as standing Muna with the hope that they were going to use those little appointments. It has continued. This other late traitor from Santa, Chidia Chu, appointed prime minister with the same objective, to use these enablers, to play platitude. They left from there, they went up to appointing governors who did their bidding. Peter Ash went to the have used periodically, and they used these traitors at a time when we were not in arms. We didn't control territory. We did not have the ability, to control, their political narratives. So if Ambazonians saw this cosmetic platitude more than 60 years ago as a massive deception to masquerade the annexation and impunity with which Cameroon has conducted itself in our land, if we saw all of their shenanigans in the past 60 years as on more than of our people, hundreds of thousands displaced, and thousands of villages and homes burnt, there is the Ambazonian people would accept, short of the termination of the and the complete withdrawal of the remnant forces of Cameroon and its colonial administration. There is nothing that is going to be on the table for negotiation, short of these things that I have listed. Cameroon can buy time with massacres like it did in Gabo, like it did in Pinyin. It can buy time with burning down our villages. It can buy time with hiring lobbying companies in the international system to rebuild its image. It knows how this thing is going to end. It is going to end with the independence and the sovereignty of Ambazonia restored. That is what Ambazonians have to know. Cameroon knows this because it's read the playbook of other occupiers and how it ended. So Ambazonians should not be worried. and we must market our national liberation strategy in a realistic manner that reflect realism rather than perception and fiction. We cannot control every town. We cannot control every activity of the occupier. Our national liberation strategy is pinpointed and it is focused on specific areas. We can use what they call national mobilization strategy to undermine Cameroon's legitimacy across the entire territory of Ambazonia. We can allow remnants of our forces in certain places to undertake military operations to undermine Cameroon's presence in those areas. But the strategy of liberation will be fought in limited states, in 5 states. I will not name them. It will be fought and won in 5 states. And anytime I am going to find problems with the fundamentals of our strategy within these 5 states, I will be worried. For now, I am not worried.
All right. Recently, you're making moves. You've launched a political program of political inclusion. You've been going around in December, in November and December. The AGO participated in the CDM retreat in Toronto. They came out with a program called the CDN statement, the Toronto statement, the Toronto declaration. You met with the leadership of APLM. You had a meeting with even those that wanted to kill you, like the likes of Eric Tato and also Mark Barretta. You also recently had a summit in Stuttgart, Germany. Met with movements like SCNC, the SCNC, and and 3 other movements, including the IGK. At this point in our liberation struggle, why are you so much focusing on creating a political inclusive environment instead of a defense inclusive focus?
I'm doing both. I'm doing both. In finding solutions to problems, you must first identify those problems.
Okay.
And what I have identified as one of the problems in the Ambazonian struggle is the role that our exile community plays as influencers. And in a social media era where somebody can sit in any room and make an audio, in a social era where people can shape narrative from a populist perspective, you must, as a leader, try to understand why people behave the way they behave, to deliberately undermine a struggle that they have sacrificed to make sure that it succeeds. We have different movements in our struggle for freedom. Whether there are two persons, whether they are where 2 or 3 are gathered, they have some level of influence because of social media. And we negate this reality at our own peril. My strategy is to be able to sit in bilateral meetings, understand why these movements and their leadership act the way they act. And for them also to ask us tough questions. For example, when we met with the IGK, we wanted to know what irritates you about the AGOVC. We were able to be blunt to them what irritates us about the IG. And based on the identification of the irritations, we would be able to find solutions to ensure that those irritations have not only on the scientific struggle, but the public relations perspective, which is critical in terms of enthusiasm and in terms of the mindset of the international community. Secondly, I have also come to the conclusion that when you gather all the movements in a room without these bilateral meetings to identify areas of divergence and areas of convergence, you create what they call gang up. You create a gang up mentality where groups simply just want to gang up against one another, especially against the AGOVC. So I'm doing both. I'm trying to make sure that I sit with these leaders and these groups, and that my own team is able to listen to them, understand them, and they listen to us and understand us. We identify shortcomings and we identify strengths. At the same time, as I said in my last outing, we have been doing the same on ground zero. Because what happens in the diaspora has implications on the attitude of actors on ground zero, has implications on the attitude of our people as the primary guarantors of the safety of the Ambazonian soldiers. And so we've been working extremely very hard to make sure that we establish lines of communication between commanders. And that has been working quite well. We're seeing that in Bui. We are seeing actions that were not possible before, like actions in Tatum, actions in Waterfall. We're seeing joint actions that took place in Mezam that involve different groups. We're seeing actions that has been taking place in different areas. So I am confident that 5 years into this war, we have a strategic understanding of the different actors and the different movements. We understand their position, and we know exactly what is required for us to project a sense of unity, a PR perspective, and work extremely very hard to massive mobilization of resources to undermine Cameroon's resurgence in certain areas.
Well, you're taking these actions at the same time, the same IG in which you're trying to foster collaboration and work with, it's at the same time splintering. They are morphing. We've gone from one IG to two IGs. And in 2022, now we have three IGs. And the three IGs, all three IGs claiming to be presidents, claiming to have people that are presidents of Ambazonia. How does this fit in with your strategy to create an inclusive political atmosphere for the Ambazonian people to unite and focus on the liberation struggle when you have movements that are bent to say they are the only ones that can speak for Ambazonia, and now there are three of them?
You may even have four. Be prepared for it. You may have the fifth. If you are not prepared for these things, you are not prepared for what comes in the national liberation struggle. You may have the sixth. You must have a plan for it. Every day you go into meetings and you sit, you hear the name of an organization you've never heard before. The Swiss are creating the environment for the proliferation of NGOs, interest groups, because they've given Ambazonians the impression that if you constitute yourself, you're going to be on the negotiation table. I will talk about that later, but it's a deliberate attempt to undermine the liberation of our country. So Ambazonians must be prepared that you are going to have the proliferation of many other groups. But what is required in leadership, and which I think is important in what I'm doing, is not to blindfold yourself to the eventuality that these things happen, and that you must be able to find a way to deal with them. All of these people who call themselves presidents are irrelevant in the national liberation discussion. They are totally irrelevant. They are what I call a massive distraction, and they constitute part of the spoiler aspect of our struggle. But who are you to make that judgment and take action? What you need to do is to recognize that the mess is there, and in leadership, you find solutions. And I think I have a pretty good idea how to deal with the situation going forward. Am I going to succeed? I'm not sure. Should I give up because it's difficult? That is something I cannot contemplate.
Recently, the Ambazonia Defense Forces have lost top commanders, one in the state of Bui, and I think two in the state of Mezam recently. There's also been recent attacks on the Bamenda Brigade. Why are these happening within a short period of time, within a certain space of the core of our resistance? Is there element of infiltration, or is just forces? There is no protocol for forces to follow.
We know exactly what is happening, and it's not something that we can talk about here. And we are still going to face some challenges, but we are fine. On a daily basis, we examine the strength of the forces. We examine the different strategic units in different strategic states that are critical for the National Liberation Plan. What you must know, and I want Ambazonians to know, is to get up one day and an entire unit of the Ambazonian Defense Forces has been wiped out. Be prepared for that eventuality, for that possibility. My role as a leader is to make sure I factor that in my National Liberation Plan and to be able to prepare for it. So sometimes when you hear an ADF general dies and before we even announce it, we announce a replacement, it's because generals know they can fall. Units know they can be taken out. Know they can be wiped out. Prepare for that. I'll give you an example. During negotiations between the FARC rebels and the Colombian government, the international community had moved FARC negotiators from the jungle into Havana in Cuba for negotiations. As they sat on the table and they were talking, the Colombian government killed the supreme leader of FARC. As the negotiators were in the room, I spoke with one of the commanders who was in the jungle for 20 years and who was part of the negotiating team. The question I asked that commander, how did you people manage it? And the commander said, I'm trying to avoid letting you know whether I was a man or a woman. But the commander said, we knew we had to sit here and talk. We knew we had to find a solution to the conflict that had been going on for so long. That the Colombian government had killed our father, the father of our resistance, the leader of our movement, at a time when we were on the table talking with them. But we couldn't walk away. That is what it requires in leadership in the liberation struggle. I can assure you I am prepared for scenario Z. I am prepared for any scenario. And I can assure you also that there is a plan for any scenario. It might take us a little bit longer to implement it because of resources, but La République will not defeat us because it decapitates a general, because it kills a commander. And so some of the things you've been seeing, we know what's going on. We cannot discuss it. Before coming into this interview, I've been having discussions with commanders of a senior commander in Mezam on these issues, and the commander is optimistic and has explained to me what is required and that we should be patient. And I ask Ambazonians to be patient. Liberation struggle is a messy endeavor. There are ups and downs. As I said, it's not a walk in a park. It's muddy, it's bloody. It's sometimes moments of disillusion. But you must be convinced that the tyranny that has put you in subjugation for 60 years cannot be allowed to perpetuate itself using force.
The War Council put out a video a few days ago showing materials that have been recovered from an action taken by ADF Mother Force against rogue forces that have taken weapons from ADF, decided they don't want to be ADF anymore, and doing all sort of activities that negatively affects the population. Why did the War Council authorize for these forces to be disarmed? And as we heard, one is killed. There are accusations on social media that these materials are not ADF materials, that ADF has just disarmed other forces and claiming that it's ADF forces. What is true? What is false?
Okay. I think the chairman of the War Council had an extensive interview yesterday on the Tory Day platform with Ma Najeles, and he explained this in the most appropriate of ways possible. I don't want to get much more into that because I think clarity has been provided, but this is what I would like to say. Each time you have a commander of the ADF force, you have the possibility for destabilization. Each time there is a crisis within an ADF base, you have the potential for exploitation. We have seen that in many areas. And one of the things I would like to say is this. We have come a long way, and we've paid a heavy price in adopting an approach that ensures that we never spill the blood of an Ambazonian soldier. That has cost us a lot. And I think this is a classic situation where all avenues of persuasion failed, and rogue elements became emboldened and had influence from more superior people because of the opportunity that and work for. And they have used this arrogance for very long to not only on of Mancon that is perceived as a part that should be in slavery. So rogue elements that were influenced by some persons in diaspora and some commanders on the ground decided to those. As freezing again, I hope you hear me, PS.
Yeah, there is the network is a little it's unstable, but now we can hear you now.
All right. I had asked the brigade to abandon these materials and to move on. I had promised them I was going to ensure that the organization resupplies them. But the rogue elements decided they were going to come back and establish a parallel base in the same proximity, which they did, and began to use that area for other nefarious activities. And we did everything human possible to resolve the issue. Not one, and the War Council ordered these materials to be recovered. And they have been recovered. Unfortunately, one of our soldiers was wounded and one was killed. That is the consequences of actions in times of war that threatens the integrity of a very, very vital brigade. We will continue.
We couldn't hear your last few statements. Let's move on. There's accusations. People have made a lot of accusations. We've gotten a question as to why is it that the ADF big force called the Akamatsus, they haven't been seen um, in action. Are they still in existence? That's a question we got for you today. Is the Akamatsu still in existence? Are they working? How come Ambazonians don't see their work? That's a question from Ground Zero.
Yes, they are. I understand that we want to time and again watch different forces in different actions. The Akamanso was part of the Operation Hammer Blow within Bamenda. It was a special unit of the Akamansos that also recovered these materials. They have been undertaking surgical operations in different parts of Lebialem. One of the ways that we function in certain areas is providing stability in areas that we feel like we have some level of static control, and to provide backup to frontline forces that are in urban areas. And so I'm confident the Akamanso is doing its work. We are upgrading the Akamansos because we want to make their outreach, a bit longer. We want to make sure that they and stabilize areas that have been liberated. So there is an ongoing effort not to strengthen the Akamansos, but to expand the Akamansos. And I ask Ambazonians to be patient with these things. We function under a very, very hostile environment, and with the limited resources that we have, there are times that we prefer to conserve strategic forces and make sure that we are able to use them at a time when it is absolutely necessary. And as you are aware, we have also set up the commandos, which with specific missions to undertake. There are other things that we will be setting up, the sniper brigade. So there are a lot of innovations that we are making in the forces. But the primary one is to be able to provide the resources to specific units to stabilize areas and transform dynamic to static control, and then provide specific resources to other units for operational purposes, and having the static units provide support when needed.
In terms of defense, let me come back to the three IGs. Three governments claiming to control a single force called the Ambazonia Restoration Forces. Three different groups set up by three different people, all doing their best to get some form of legitimacy and to be recognized as being part of the liberation effort, all claiming to control a single force with a generic name, with a generalized name, without a command and control structure, all claiming to control what Ambazonians call Ambazonia Restoration Forces. Help us understand how problematic is this, both in terms of diplomacy and in terms of internal cohesion.
What you should know is that these people don't control a force. They don't have a constituted force. I give you an example. When I pass a command as the commander-in-chief of the Ambazonian Defense Forces, an ADF commander cannot overrule that command publicly, and that's the worst. Okay, he cannot. These so-called persons don't control forces. They are influencers. It's what I call a quid pro quo. So you exchange money for loyalty. That's what is happening. So they don't have a force that have command and control. That's why they are going to find a general on the ground, makes an audio and slam the commander-in-chief. That's unacceptable in the liberation struggle. So they don't have control over forces. They have established a kind of an understanding, which is loyalty for money basis. And the forces show the loyalty when they want in exchange for little money. And most of the time we see it as an anti-ADF strategy rather than a liberation strategy. So they don't have control over forces. And you don't have anything called the Ambazonian Restoration Force. No, there is nothing like that. You have maybe the Bui Warriors, you have the Mountain Lions, you have different independent forces that they have assigned over these forces, a name without a command and control under that name. You hear the supposed commander of that Amazonian Restoration Force in Lebialem quarreling through an audio with someone who is supposed to be his handler, or with another general. He dismisses general by audio. So it's a joke. That is not to undermine. That is not to undermine the effort. But it is you people. See, it is you people who give these people a lot of relevance. For example, you get me for an interview and you're asking me about some pages. That's giving them relevance for nothing. If we focus on the issues, you will not have this kind of a discussion. So, but in a nutshell, they don't control forces. They don't control forces. In a liberation struggle, there must be command and control that is respected from the leader to the forces. It means if I'm going to issue a command, General Efang is going to respect that command. He cannot disobey my command and do that publicly. They will sequence. And so that is the way you run a national leadership struggle. General Efang to I'm just powerful is because we've established procedures in of consensus in such a way that everyone is involved. And so what you see now in public are consensus decisions made by the command structure. And it becomes and it's not influenced by money, it's not influenced by title. I cannot just get up one day and I make General Efang a field marshal. It does not exist within the command framework of the Amazonian Defense Forces. So you don't reward. Yeah, man, I suffered. So I cannot simply just get up one morning. I made brigadier, small picking, whatever. I don't even have the powers to appoint a general. That is the powers of the chairman of the war council, and he is very hesitant. Sometimes I will tell him, and he makes a written appointment. And after a particular general has been informed, and then the supreme commander gives his authority, that appointment is made. It is served to the appointed general attached with the code of conduct and the rules that define his and he knows exactly what he's supposed to do. A liberation struggle, kind of in Jangi house where you scratch my back and feel good attitude, in a very serious endeavor, like a struggle. So don't give too much relevance in these political machinations that you see in public. Please don't give too much relevance to these things. There are things we will have to deal with, no doubt, because we are in the social media era. If we were in 1960, probably none of these names you will ever hear of them. But if you get up tomorrow and declare yourself, you can go on TV. Your grandma and cousin will be clapping for you. You can very big and tell us about your administration will do. It's the national is part of it's part of the story that historians will write about our struggle. Though it's a joke in a serious moment that is costing lives, there is not much we can do to stop to mitigate their effect in derailing our struggle.
A few months ago, you came to the Ambazonian people and you explained to them your plan for 2022 and that it's possible if the plan is followed for the liberation to enter a transition phase. Critics have said, you are over-ambitious. You dream too big. You talk with really appetizing and attractive, charismatic words. And they've said in the past, you've said the same thing. They said, hey, in 2021, by October 2021, Ambazonia would have a state that is fully liberated and will be under total Ambazonian control. Now it's 2022. You've informed the Ambazonian people the possibility to move the liberation into transition. Are you overambitious? Do you dream too much? Are these things practical? Should people count on it? Should Ambazonian just count on your word? Is this possible?
No, before us, somebody had a dream that one day, his kids will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And some other people, from the beginning, when we said it was totally impossible, and you set goals that are achievable. I can assure you, if if we are able to mobilize the resources, I can take Ambazonia into transition in 2 months. Two, I'm not speaking with water in my enter transition in 2 months. It's mindset based on reality that we see on the ground. We can divide Bamenda into two and push La Republic to control the part of Up Station if we are constantly resupplied. We can eliminate La Republic completely from Momo. We can eliminate them completely from Bui. And when I talk about entering transition, I'm talking about sufficient demonstration of power on the ground and translating even two states from dynamic to static control, that you are able to establish an overarching structure that begins to focus on how you institutionalize things within liberated areas and expand your control. And you are able to accept without ambiguity at the level of the international system that of your future, not only your present. It is very simple. And I am already in the mindset of transition. When I function on a daily basis on the Ambazonian struggle, I have my mind set on transition. The period when authoritative political leadership is recognized at the level of the international community based on movement on the ground that is deemed sufficient enough to consider Ambazonians in charge of territory and sovereignty of their country. And I think if Ambazonians focus on mobilizing the resources, focus on the defense of our homeland, strengthening our forces, expanding our reach, we can get into transition in a few months. And I
So
think
what
that's
um,
possible.
what do you think? People have said you are the only one that you run an organization that is basically you, even though you have a vice president that is public and very visible. So is the problem within the Ambazonia Governing Council a problem of lack of ability to mobilize resources? Because you said 800,000, that's not too much money. How come the Ambazonia Governing Council has not been able to mobilize the kind of resources that is sufficient for your project? And secondly, this is a question from the public. Why is it that other department heads, other leaders within the structures of AGOVC are not seen in public, even mobilizing for the liberation? What is the problem in terms of galvanizing funding within AGOVC? Is it an institutional problem? Is it a public perception problem? What is the problem?
Ambazonia Cameroon. Ambazonians function like when I did chemistry, and they tell you there are times you need a catalyst to engineer the bonding of some elements of the periodic table. Ambazonians want to be excited. Ambazonians emerge from the state of Cameroon where corruption, manipulation, or better marketing strategy and substance than the truth. So sometimes the Ambazonian Governing Council faces the problem of being a disrupting institution within the premise of a very corrupt financial and political system. Sometimes people too are scared because the Ambazonian government is a total departure from what they have been used to for the past 60 years. And we are emerging coming from a period of massive propaganda, massive attack and sabotage on the Amazonian Governing Council and its leadership, that we have taken enough time through your effort and other communicators to restore its credibility, its standing within the Amazonian political space. We mobilized resources. Last month alone, we mobilized 45,000 US dollars. The month before, we mobilized, I think, 25,000 US dollars. So there is an uptick in the commitment of the Amazonian people. It will take a while. We do not have the godfathers. Maybe one is going to show up somehow and is able to listen to what I say and see the wisdom behind the strategy and the program I am putting forward. And I say we're going to make the requisite investment in a lump sum injection. It takes time in a struggle to be able to operate from massive political propaganda and showmanship to that of real national endeavor that can lead to freedom. As far as in the Ambazonian Governing Council are concerned, let me call them by name. You have the Secretary of State, Dr. Larry Ayaba, laziness in coming out. And I think you've called him out many times in the executive to step forward. His dad was a bulldozer, Chief Ayamba, who did not have a television in front of her and speak, but move from village to village to mobilize people. You have the chairman of the National Council, Comrade Frank Gore, who comes from Meme, never been seen. You have the chairman of the Council of Mission, Comrade Anaka Divine, who comes from Momo. They think more than they act. You have my finance secretary, who comes from Manu, Comrade Eno, who always sits there and doesn't provide that leadership. And I thank you for bringing this question. And I thank Ambazonians for asking. We have fine men and women within the Ambazonian Governing Council. There are two reasons they act this way. One, they believe in the effectiveness of their leader to be able to speak on their behalf. That is what they believe, that their leader is effective enough to be the director. And they should be managers of department and people who oversee the implementation of policies and the plan of their leader. That is also not a bad thing. It is not also unusual. Struggle for the struggle. Nelson Mandela, even though he was in jail. You have other struggles where you've mostly heard about the leaders. So it is not unusual. Sometimes it is deliberate blackmail to want to project the Ambazonian Governing Council as a one-man issue. That projection, you can own the stability of the no pitting forces, where you can find a scenario where if my vice president will go out there and say, I am corrupt and I'm a thief, I'm going to tender my resignation in 24 hours. If the person who is the chairperson of my war council refuses to take my command, I'm going to resign in 24 hours. And I am not going to split the egg of sea. I'm going to remain a member. I'm going to say I've lost the confidence of those with whom we work together. And so the culture of the egg of sea is unique within the Ambazonian political space. It is unlike what we have seen before. And Ambazonians, because of their lack of understanding, some of them have used it, to attack the egg of sea. Some of them have used it to undermine its leadership. But you must know, in every struggle there is a leader. The leader becomes somehow the identity of that struggle. And that is how the Ambazonian Governing Council, operates.
In your own words, how can the egg of sea overcome this challenge in order to fulfill the promise you've made to the Ambazonian people to take them to transition in 2022?
Pivot in having these bilaterals, in speaking with others. The Ambazonian Governing Council and my leadership had been wrongly marketed as a unilateralist organization, insisting on claiming power, insisting on installing its own leader as the president of Ambazonia. This blackmail had really worked on the psyche of the Ambazonian people. And it will take a while to undermine this blackmail. It will take a while to let Ambazonians understand that when we reject manipulative, collaborative approaches, it is not because we are against collaboration. It is because we are against a system of collaboration that is determined part of its craft. When we call out policies of other movements in terms of its impact on the image of our struggle, it is not because we want only ours to be accepted. We take the time and patience to explain why we oppose a particular policy and why the one we are proposing has more wisdom and substance than the one we are rejecting. Proved the Ambazonian Governing Council right when we stood strongly for an early entry into a cacophony called a negotiation. Events have also proven us right when we rejected the APLM unilateralist call for a ceasefire. So I think Ambazonians are coming to the understanding that our opposition has nothing to do with what someone wrote on Facebook that we show oversabi. It's not a matter of oversabi. It is just simply a matter of two things: experience and what I call observation. We believe in the notion of empirism. And empirical knowledge is born out of observation and is born out of experience. And experience has shown through time and space that in liberation struggle, at the onset, there are attempts by the international community to re-establish status quo through cosmetic processes. And if you are not If you are not smart, you will not get them. Secondly, experience has also shown that the international community has a strategy of wooing liberation leaders and giving them relevance based on association and forcing them to use that to be able to make policies that does not serve their own interest. And I think Ambazonians will come to the conclusion that most policies that we've put in place, though somehow rejected at the beginning, have held out to be, reasonable.
Okay. I think, is that your answer to the question as to what AGovC wants to do in order to have better mechanisms to attract people that can fund the vision for 2022 and help the transition project?
The best strategy of the Ambazonian Governing Council is to be able to demonstrate to the Ambazonian people that it has an inclusive approach in developing a strategy. It has a solution in bringing Ambazonians together. It has a national liberation agenda. It's able to build bridges through these bilateral discussions. We are also identifying resource Ambazonians and having discussions with them on the investment they can make to push this struggle forward. Through these efforts, we will reconscientize Ambazonians. By the genuine and the character of leadership that we present, that this is the deal that will take us to that period of transition. And I'm optimistic that we are going to have that breakthrough.
When you meet with some of these leaders in terms of your bilateral meeting, are they in accord with your vision for 2022? Are they in accord to also want the Ambazonian liberation to get to transition this year? Do you have some of these discussions in terms of that?
Meetings, because one of the things that we agreed during this bilateral is to present as little information for public consumption to avoid a situation where spoilers information construct their own narrative and undermine future meetings. But I can assure you that for every leader I have met, I have spoken about the necessity to move to transition and how that can work. And I think all of these people are very optimistic and are happy that we are meeting. Some of the meetings have been contentious, they have been tough, but we will continue to have these discussions for the interest of the Amazonian people.
Can you tell the Ambazonian people in a few words what your political inclusion for transition looks like? What does it involve? What should Ambazonia be expecting in order for them to make the necessary investment? You've demanded or put a plan that requires $800,000, which is about 400 million CFA, in order to recruit, train, and arm 400 special commandos in order to succeed with the liberation plan. Number one, where are you in your liberation plan in terms of mobilization, training, and the equipment of these forces? We are already in the second week of March. You said transition was good. We should start expecting transition by August. So we are 3 months into your plan. Where are we in that plan? And number two, how is the mobilization and the campaign going for that plan? Number three, how would the political setup look like? Why should Ambazonian trust this plan? Why should other movements trust this plan? How would that guarantee post-independence political stability for Ambazonia? And why should the international community trust this plan? That's a long question.
One of the reasons why Tony Blair was successful, the former German Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder was able to build a coalition which he dubbed the Neue Mitte. He borrowed that strategy from the Tony Blair, Gordon Brown strategy of building a new middle, which the Germans call the Neue Mitte. I think my strategy is based on the new middle. In our struggle, we have extreme radicals on the right and extreme radicals on the left. We have extreme radicals who are not internationalists, who are extreme nationalists. We have extreme radicals who are internationalists and extreme liberalists. And we have people who have a conceptual framework of liberation which is based on assumptions, based on opinions. We have a limited number of people who understand the strategies that we are putting in place. But there's one thing that every Ambazonian has been talking about. How do we establish an inclusive framework that satisfies the internationalists, the nationalists, the extreme left, the extreme right in our struggle? Is to build a new middle or the Neue Mitte that is able to provide a compromise position for everyone. And now let me go deep into the plan that I look at when I look at transition. It is both a political plan, it is both a defense plan. It is both a plan for negotiation and it is both a plan for liberation. When you observe the evolution of our struggle in the last 5 years and the different attempts at bringing us together, it has brought in others that legitimacy. It has to be based on a group of people sitting like project managers and building a framework for collaboration and dishing that framework out to other movements and other leaders, taking away an important ingredient in accepting, a particular framework for collaboration: originalism and participation. Now, my strategy is first to make everyone feel as the founder of that original idea. So if I meet with the APLM, we have discussions as equals, we show due respect, we give relevance to everyone's idea, and we agree on most. We don't make agreements, we don't sign deals and stuff. We just have a conversation. When we meet with others, we have conversations and then we identify areas for further discussions. Once you have these bilaterals, you are going to reach a level of understanding that will begin to build confidence, will begin to get people to understand you better based on these discussions, not based on gossips, not based on blackmail that is being thrown out there. Now, specifically, the transition model is based on the different components or the different actors within the Ambazonian liberation struggle. You have those who have contributed immensely in building narrative for the Ambazonian struggle in the social media space. You have those who have placed themselves at the forefront in the defense of the homeland. You have political movement leaders who have been instrumental either in a negative or a positive way in shaping the Ambazonian dream. You have groups of women who came together at the onset of this liberation struggle and made their voices heard. You have victims who are in jail liberty because of their struggle. You have IDPs, refugees. Voices represent national conversation. And so, during the period of transition, what we are imagining is through the bilaterals, we identify areas of convergence and divergence, but we are able to bring together all of these different components that have contributed immensely in advancing our struggle to agree on a transitional council. That transitional council will now be able to elect a transitional authority tapped from the transitional council, regulated by the transitional council, an all-inclusive body that then grants legitimacy to the transitional authority to begin to take us through to the period of transition. And what will be the role of the transitional authority? At that stage, it will be a convergence between the period of transition and the period of liberation. And negotiations for statehood usually occur in that period of convergence between the national liberation and the transition. And then you then have an emergence of a transitional authority that is conceived by the international community as legitimate enough because it's born out of national consensus, not only to negotiate, but of governance. In this way, everybody sees themselves as having the possibility of emerging during the period of transition as a transitional leader for Ambazonia, either a transitional president or a transitional leader or a transitional prime minister. And I think we can only get into that transition. This idea of to a certain level of transition where there is clarity and certainty of where we are in defense to be able to convince the international community that an emerging structure out of consensus is legitimate enough to make decisions that are binding on all Ambazonians. What is the alternative? So I'm not stupid. What if my plan fails completely? What if these lofty ideas of bilaterals and expecting to some transition into governing council is also ready to go it alone? That is why in building our forces, I am making sure that there is also consensus between the forces on the ground for purposes of effectiveness, for purposes of collaboration, for purposes of impact, that I am able to use my leadership as the leader of the Ambazonian Governing Council to convince enough Ambazonians to continuously form the strategy to the point where I am able to take Ambazonians to the period of transition. If we take Ambazonian to that period of transition, shall we simply just announce that the AGOVC is taking over the government? No. We will be able to still establish a transitional council. But those who refuse to be part of this conversation must have lost the opportunity to shape the process. They might have the opportunity to influence the outcome, but not to shape the process. That's why I think Ambazonians should look at this. Independence means independence. Independence means you cannot allow a foreign power to be the controller of your educational system. Independence means you cannot allow a foreign power to be the one to establish your public health policy. Independence means you are able to determine the way that the occupier and alien rule function within your territory. But you cannot also simply tell people not to go to school for eternity without creating an alternative educational institution. because you build a cohesive system or you build a stable system.
What kind of support do you want from the Ambazonian people?
Ambazonians people have failed woefully to sacrifice. Sacrifice is on pleasantries. A good attitude. We have also failed to compel, for example, Ukraine and establish with an army national peril. They tell everyone above the age of 18 that you have to stay put to defend the homeland. National obligation to the defense of the homeland. Must never see the survivor doing Ayaba a favor. What Ambazonians to do is to commit sincerely to the survival of the Ambazonian state and the Ambazonian people, to reducing the suffering and pain of our people, to establishing the conditions that hope can take root or re-establish within Ambazonia. And this commitment will not be seen at a time when you are happy or most desperate. It should be seen at a time when you are most angry. About making a commitment to Dr. Cho Ayaba or to the Amazonian Governing Council. It is making a commitment to a plan that I have presented and that I think is the best plan that Ambazonia has, that can help us consolidate our gains, stabilize areas, move from dynamic to static control, and establish a legitimate political institution that is going to be recognized by the international community and take us from the period of liberation to that of transition. You need Ambazonians to look at this and see this as your roadmap to freedom. And if all of you commit financially, we will have enough resources to sustain resistance. If you know short of bullets, soldiers cannot stop fighting because they've run short of bullets. We must be in a place to continuously supply bullets. That's why I've announced a 100,000 bullets that can last for at least 5 months. If you present this, they will be fighting on a daily basis on the streets of Boya, on the street of Bamenda. We will be shipping these people in coffins on a daily basis if we are just able to provide enough bullets for our soldiers. Cameroon conscripts are young, inexperienced, and unwilling to die for beer. Ambazonians fighters have 5-6 years of experience fighting in their neighborhood. They have courage, they have determination, and they have something Cameroon does not have. They have a cause to fight, live, or die for. What they need is an investment in funding constantly. Don't be deceived by pleasantries. It will not take you an inch forward. What works in a liberation struggle is dogged commitment to a strategy. It cannot be hazard. It can be circumstances. It cannot be imposed by the enemy. It must be conceptualized and put in place by leadership. I think the Ambazonian Governing Council has offered. if you commit to it, we will take you into in the future, and it will be and sanctity restore liberation struggle.
Thank you very much, leader of our War of Independence, Dr. Cho Ayaba, for taking the time to speak to the Ambazonian people to offer clarity and the way forward in order for us to reset our liberation, reunify our people, consolidate our gains, and create a new momentum for the Ambazonian people. Sir, we're very grateful for your time. You can make your closing remarks to the Ambazonian people and to our forces on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. PS. Thank you very much for your own commitment, for your dedication, and for not giving up to all the shenanigans that come your way. And I want to also thank our people, great sense of nationalism and commitment to the liberation of our homeland. As I said, the endeavor will be one of the most difficult endeavor any of you have committed yourself. There is maximum uncertainty, clarity, and there are constant setbacks. It works in all struggles. You require and what you have is leadership that has factored all of these things in a national liberation plan that can defeat the enemy and establish your country within other countries in the world, and to provide the nations and states that stand with us in the struggle, in providing the resources in terms of finances, in medical, on our own in the past 60 years. From the beginning, maybe this is good luck, because all others who had godfathers were provided pseudo-political independence without economic independence. And down the road, they became neo-colonial states that were teleguided from Western capitals. And I said, maybe ours is a promise that if we make the investment ourselves, we will be able to control the outcome, have true political independence, shape our political institutions to reflect, our own national reality, and true economic independence to be able to manage our human and natural resources for the best interests of the Ambazonian people. The only thing between us and freedom, dedication, fights, ideas, work. These take us to a free homeland require something more. I call on those who are 18 and above on the ground to join our forces in the defense of our neighborhood. I call on Ambazonians who still take part in the military of Cameroon to remember that there will be a day that they will give an account of their stewardship serving in the army of the butchers. They have a choice, because they are at the road junction, to continue on the same path of insanity, enabling the colonizer to murder us, or to take the high road and join our forces to defend our people and our villages. I call on Ambazonians serving in the military of foreign countries to realize, though you nationalize in those countries, you've provided yourself to defend America, to defend the United Kingdom, Germany, France, and other places where you were born, where your parents are, where you will policies are help direct our forces. They need to mobilize resources for them to be supplied constantly. Fellow Ambazonians, what is holding us is not the absence of a plan. It's not the absence of leadership. It's not because we are not united. What is holding us back from moving into transition is constant supply of bullets and guns to help our determined forces fight on a daily basis and end the tyranny of Cameroon. And if all of us are just the way we think, not influenced by our mood in the moment, political allegiances, tribal allegiances, I can assure you, as promised at the beginning of the year, we will get into transition in August. I also ask of you to support the plan of political discussions, bilateral meetings, and be patient. Don't push for the rapid emergence of a particular structure. You should support leadership to have these conversations so we can understand each other. We can understand areas of convergence and areas of disagreement. We can be able to have these discussions in private and be able to emerge in the future with something that is sustainable and that is saluted as things that have been discussed. What I can also tell you today, you should not, it will not cost anything. Cameroon is not ready to talk because on the country, we must be focused like a people whose survival depends on the defense of their land. In a period of national disaster, in a period when our people are threatened, villages are burned, all of us must become firefighters. Politicians will emerge tomorrow. Let's focus on defense, invest on defense, invest on buying bullets, invest in buying guns. That is the only thing I can make sure we end. What we have put in our efforts. We need commitment. Going on from today, commit to a monthly amount for the liberation of your country. Sit down and ask yourself, how did you spend in 2021 compared to a son that was lost by a mother? How much did you spend in 2021 compared to a fighter who lost his limb? You will realize we make much noise and spend very little. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for taking the time to answer questions. Thank you very much for your authenticity. Thank you very much for your character. And thank you very much for all you do for the Ambazonian people. Thank you and your family for holding the fire and the spirit of the Ambazonian resistance, our quest for freedom and our quest for sovereignty. God bless you and have yourself a good night. Fellow Ambazonians, we have come to the end of a great discussion with the leader. We have come to the end of this interview, episode 16 on ACN. Have yourself a blessed night. Oh, before we go, next weekend, I think that should be the 26th. Let me check my calendar. On Saturday, the 26th of March, the Ambazonia Governing Council will be doing its monthly fundraiser, as the leader has indicated, for the continuous implementation of the National Transition Plan to make sure by August we can get to Boya, or we can start instituting the transition council or the transition authority on the ground. So you are all invited. We are calling on every Ambazonian to join the mobilization for Operation 100,000 bullets. That's what the leader has said. That's what the forces needs. And that's what will help us to build a momentum that will change the current status of the conflict. Thank you for participating. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this. And thanks to all those that submitted questions for the leader. We are very grateful. We'll be talking to you in a few days from now. Have yourself a blessed evening. And before we go, we also want to thank our technical team and the ACN crew that have worked tirelessly over the last few days to prepare for this episode. Thank you very much for your sacrifices, your generosity, and your kindness in terms of time, energy, and maybe resources to keep the TV running for us to be able to communicate to our people on the ground. So God bless you all. You all have a good night. Fellow Ambazonians, Papa, Mami, them, we will don't take the time for watch with today. We don't get a great discussion with the leader of our war of independence. We ask you questions, very tough questions. Some of those questions them, now when I say self, when I send them. Most of those questions, they come out for people them for ground zero. Now only one question, it will come out for people for diaspora. So today, the conversation, it will be designed by ground zero. The conversation at ground zero determine which is the one year from the leader. With the kind answer where they want them, the clarity where they need them, the understanding where they need them. So the conversation today not be me a shape them. Now when I shape them, my goal for you now just for us the question them the way when I don't put them for the way it go be very effective as when I don't see them at the places where the whole leaders them for public accountability, for public transparency, and for make sure say leader that they do the thing where they don't promise and for the Ambazonian people, even though not the president of Ambazonia Governing Council. Even though not my boss, but when it comes for this program, it be a leader of the Ambazonian people. Me, I be person where I represent the public for us when a question. And as when I know, we ask those questions without, as Capo then the column, without any conny. Very frank question for make sure say the leader give una the answer from inside his heart. Not be only for a head. We know say that my way you get plenty sense. We must ask questions the way they must touch his heart too. So we thank all una for all what una don't do and for we forget a successful program. We'll be talk for una again small time. All right. May God bless una. May God bless our forces. Make we keep the fire of the resistance burning. Una good night.